start off with technology to set the timer to make sure that I stick to the range. Ann O'Leary, I've been here about 6 years ago. Can you hear me okay? Everyone hear me in the back? Okay. This is my preferred voice, but I can do my father of three voice. My kids think I'm a fun dad or a firm dad, just depends on how they're behaving, quite honest, but I can get that voice going. Ann O'Leary brought me here about 6 years ago, and she wanted me to return on similar, it's a little different topic, but she did ask us to remind you that your parish patroness is St. Clare, which is also one of technology and screens, television and screens. So she's been saying several prayers over the past week, and has for me as well as for this. So tonight is really about creating awareness and opening discussion. The real work is after you leave. The real work is after you start to shine light on some of the things that maybe you see but you don't always have a name for, or maybe you feel but you don't always know how to kind of put words to it. So the intention with teens, or with each of you represent probably different levels of kids, I realize that. I'm going to use the word teens a lot because my kids are 11, twin boys are 11. My daughter's 13, but since she's been about 8, I've said, you're like 8 going on 12, or 10 going on 13. I always like to give them a couple years ahead because I want them to grow into that age. Sometimes I forget what age they actually are because I have to figure out either at or minus 2. So I'll start with a question for you all. What are your intentions? What are your goals? Seems like one of those movies, those teenage date movies where parents sit down with teenagers and say, what are your intentions? What are your goals for today? It can feel a little uncomfortable, it can feel a little broad or challenging, but I think it's an important place to start, the beginning, and the vision you have, because that's where God started, from the beginning with the goal and intention, because what's on your heart and the way you see things is usually how the outcome is going to go. So how we view things such as technology is a big part of this. So before I get into the technology part, what would you say your goals of parenting are? I was going to say, yep, go.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yes.
It says Christian parenting, being not from a Christian background. I'm wondering, like, is this something very specific to that, or is like for any parents not even having such a background?
For any parents, I think so. Great point. I work at a Center for Christian Counseling in Madison, Wisconsin, 3 days a week. I also work in Sauk City, which is a general therapy center. So I like to say I speak multiple languages and dialects. I'm Christian, but I'm also Catholic. But a lot of tonight will be what we call first order change, is really the understanding the patterns or the concepts. Second order change is really getting underneath what the heart or the relational part of it. Your attitude towards it, your ability to access discussions and have honest conversations or connections, in particular with your kids about this, helping them guide themselves, be good self-parenting. I will refer to what I call third order change, which is really spiritual change. Whatever would make sense of it, but really a virtue or a value or a moral principle. So I'll be referring to a Christian lens, but it's definitely relevant from a psychological and a mental health perspective. Is that fair? I appreciate that. I always say that at the beginning of doing sessions. I always say my job's to help you fire me, so I like to be as upfront as I can up front. So if it's not a good fit, that's okay. But if it is, I think we all can learn together. So asking yourselves, what's your goal of parenting? Teens, yep.
Hopefully pass down our solid moral values to our kids.
Passing down tradition, continuing. I'm a group therapist, and there's a few too many to sit in a circle, but we can definitely do more of it ongoing. Or you can just kind of hope that I don't look at you or call on you. I won't call on you, by the way, unless you answer me ahead.
I always think of being disciplined, and I think I'm struggling, I'm trying,
Yes.
but if I can learn some techniques and implement those things.
Yeah, we'll talk about, it's kind of like bumper bowling, how to guide them towards a lane that kind of gets there eventually, but having parameters and boundaries. What are the goals for teens? What would you say your parents' goals are? Why exactly do we even need parents? You ever wonder that? Out loud, maybe? Do you really listen? So from a therapeutic and a biblical perspective, our goal is to love, obviously because we're loved first, as First John said. We continue the path of showing and shining light and to grow towards something healthy, to keep them safe, to teach them, to protect them, to prepare them. So key words that I think fit for all of us. but we also want to enhance their ability to learn and grow, and that includes their mind and their heart and their soul. Kids' brains nowadays, with the sensory and the access to things, even as they're toddlers and all the different, they're so smart. I apologize for my generation or older, but they're smarter than us. Their computers are stronger than ours. But by about age 10 to 12 to 13, if they don't enhance that and guide that well, they actually underperform us in social intelligence and emotional intelligence, relational and spiritual. So what happened? So we want to be able to guide them well and enhance what they're already capable of. To protect them from any unnecessary deterrents or things that can distract or dissuade from or detriment from their learning, if it's intellectual learning or emotional, relational learning, or obviously a spiritual virtue growth learning. And to promote that growth and development. Anything I'm missing? Would you disagree? I like yeah buts. Until I have kids, almost teens, I've been waiting for the teenage years. I couldn't wait till the toddler when they're done and they can use their words. I'd always say, wait till you use your words, then I can really parent you. Or else they're just kind of like, caveman grunting. I mean, us adults usually do that too. But, being able to recognize the yeah buts or the resistances, things that don't quite fit, because that's where we want to channel. So let's do a quick word association. I get used to it. They literally said I could touch the screen. I've never used this technology before. I'm not a big technology guy myself, actually. So let's do a quick word association. I'm going to say two words. You tell me what you think. Parents plus kids equals. Family? What's your instinct? Doesn't have to be politically correct, yeah?
Yeah, family.
Family?
Road trip.
Road trip, yes. I like that.
I would say struggle.
Struggle? Yeah. It ain't easy.
It's like every day is a struggle, morning to evening. In a good way, but it's a struggle.
So if I used the different words, parents plus kids plus technology, what would you say that equals? Can y'all see? Okay. So,
Hair raising.
hair raising, terrifying. Excitement and fear are actually the same emotion initially. It's just we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Physiologically, we feel it the same. Hair raising. Parents plus kids plus technology. Is it tug of war? Like a power struggle? Is it, oh, this is awesome. Is it hide and seek? Where you try to hide the technology from them and they seek it out, and then they hide from you and you try to figure out where they went with it or what they did with it? Is it a perfect, happy picture of happiness and bliss? Maybe. Probably not. But it could be. What's different? What's different when you add technology? Let's think about that. How is today's family different than 20 years ago? For kids that are younger, think like Full House, not Fuller House, but when they're all young. So the 90s, 2000s. What was different? How is children's experience different than 90s or 2000s? I'm thinking walls that hung on phones. AOL Instant Messenger. Y'all remember what malls are? What's different? Libraries, you'd have to go to rent the computer at the library for an hour to play Oregon Trail. Remember that?
Dial-up or
What's that?
dial-up or
I won't do the sound, but we all probably heard it in our ears as you said that. Has the goal of parenting changed though? No. So a lot of this is stewardship. We think of stewardship as financial management, but it's emotional, it's stewardship. It's learning how to balance and guide us towards a good outcome, but working with what is in front of us, working with the world as it is, not as we would have it, as the Serenity Prayer says. So tonight I want to focus on better understanding and solidifying the intentions of parenting then, now, but with technology. And to be able to, for teens in particular, representing your children, to listen for ways that they can collaborate or work with you to open an honest discussion. To understand what they really intend versus maybe what they don't quite see the warning signs or pitfalls. When I see clients, I usually see all ages, but kids or teens. I'll work with the parents and the teen at first, and kids usually quiet at first, and say some things, thumbs up, thumbs down, or caveman grunt a little bit. But when the parent leaves, then I ask, is there anything you would like to have said that your parents aren't there? And they'll open up quite a bit. Where did your parents get it right? Where did they get it wrong? And if we're talking about technology, I'll sometimes ask, not right away in the first session always, but if you could unlimited play as long as you want, they never knew it, how long would you play for? Now your fear is they'll never stop. Some kids won't. That's true. But a lot of kids are like, I don't know, 10:30, I'd be kind of tired, or summer I'd probably play for like half the day and then I get bored and go play ball. The range is not that far off, because I was confused that the parents were fearing it's this worst case scenario, and the kids are actually, if I was a negotiator, I'm like, you're only about a half hour off. But the power struggle could be a lot longer than that. So getting to know the real intentions sometimes isn't as scary as we think. The biases that we hold, us to them, them to us. My vision for parenting is something rooted in principle, but also adapting for the reality in which we live in. To be able to take an us versus it approach, as opposed to a me versus you. And in relationships, there's two people or two units, kids, parents, but there's also a triad. In the Christian or Catholic belief, there's a bigger picture, whether it's the virtue or the value, or whether it's God working with us. And you gotta remember, kids, that's pretty cool, because God's on your team too. In fact, I think of parenting as, y'all play sports or been a part of a sports team. Almost every sport has a field or court. Every unit has a referee. What do the referees do? They set the rules, they clarify the rules, and make sure it's reasonable, fair, safe, fun. Parents are like that. We set reasonable roles and parameters in which they're, can you imagine showing up to a football game and it was about a 30-yard field? Or a triangle? Or the rules were 10 points for a tackle and 2 points for a touchdown? Like, it would be goofy. And sometimes that's what it feels like, because the kids don't know what actually you stand for or what your parameters are. And you don't know until maybe they cross the line and you didn't know they crossed. But there's also coaches. We're meant to be coaches as parents. Set them up for success. Teach them the skills you think are needed to help them get to the end goal that they have. And yet, kids are the teammates. Now, God is a teammate, he's a coach, and he's a referee. So we want to bring a bigger picture in this. Being able to use technology as a way to draw out these virtues and character traits, not just create a me versus you. So what's at stake? What's at stake in the game? Well, I think happiness or sanity. I think peace and harmony at times. It reminds me of the story of my dad teaching me how to drive a car. I don't know how many 16 or 15-year-olds are in here. Did you have a car yet? Have a license? Temps? All right, so I was 15 going on 16, and I had awesome vision of like hair in the wind, not Claire, it's hair now, but somebody by my side, awesome car, Corvette. Something kind of like this. But my reality is a little bit more like a 1995 Chevy Lumina, maroon, in an industrial park. So there was no witnesses. So my dad, he drives there and he parks the car and gets out. He tells me I can go and sit behind the wheel, and I'm excited. Here's my turn. And he sits down. The only problem is he kept the keys in his hand. So I'm in the driver's seat. He's got the keys. And for 30 minutes, I think he gave me an entire recital of the owner's manual of all the gadgets this car has. And I didn't understand, and I was really getting impatient. Tried to appease him, and so eventually, I cuts it short, I think, that he meant to. It was probably going to be 60 minutes. But he said something I'll never forget. He said, son, before I hand you these keys, you need to know something. This is a gift. This is a tool. This is a tool that can do wonderful for you, for our family. It can do awesome and bring you to awesome places. But it also is a 3,000-pound weapon that can kill you or others in your life. I love you, I want good for you, and I trust you. He didn't drop the mic, but he dropped the keys. My jaws dropped, but wow. And I think technology is like that. It can do really good things for us. It can be a blessing in our home. It can take us to a lot of places. In our home, virtual reality. But it also can be a gift, or it can be a weapon. My dad treated technology like that too. I remember the first computer we got. He got the box out, and Windows 95. He had all the manuals out, of course, and he's just trying to read things, and I just started typing, punching buttons and figuring out what happened. And he'd hear some beeps and boops, and he'd try to read what happened, and then I figured out how I unbroke what I just broke, and then I'd keep hitting buttons, and he didn't know. So that's kind of how our dance went. And that's what happens with kids, is because they're digital natives, they're actually born in this technology era. We're digital immigrants. If we're above 20 to 30, we kind of learn into this. It's our second language, never our first. My lesson didn't really end that way, though. That wasn't the end of it. 3 months later or so, I have my temps now, and I was driving, I'm from Green Bay. You guys are close to Illinois, I don't think that's a swear word, but I'm from Green Bay. So my church was about a block away from Lambeau. And so I'm from Green Bay, we're Home Depot, getting my supplies for Eagle Scout project, and I'm driving, and I'm at a stoplight, and I'm about to take a right, and I see people taking lefts, they must have a green arrow, we're coming, they're protected, so I go. And I almost got us killed. Guess what my dad was doing? He was on his phone. The one that's like hooked to the car. He's talking to my mom. And he goes, "What were you doing?" I said, "Well, there's a left, and I thought, and I assumed." He goes, "You assumed?" I said, "Wait a second, what were you doing? Why weren't you watching me? Why weren't you teaching me?" And just think about that. In my mind, he was the one instructing me. He gave me this. I thought he was going to teach me. And yet, my choice of how I used it almost caused detriment. And how sad that would be for my parent, my mom at home, my kid, my siblings, or our future. And to think about how when we hand technology over, we have to be aware of the gift we give also comes with a risk. And yet we have to kind of know that at any point we can make the wrong turn. It's not to scare us, it's just to be aware of the danger. I just took a right at a left turn tonight. I've been here twice, by the way, and I don't even know where I am because I've always driven in the dark. And unless my phone tells me the little blue arrow to follow the whole way, I wouldn't know how to get here. Okay. But I had the same scenario and I went right back to it. So there's a potential gift of technology. It has great benefits. It can educate us, there's no denying it. It can communicate all across the world. We can bring people into rooms clearly with COVID and whatever that reality was. There's ability to stay connected. There's an ability to educate, and I'm like a homeschool hero, even though I've never been educated homeschooled, because I got to teach my kids all about history and show them a bunch of videos, and then we get to go travel to a bunch of cool places. All I had to do is look on YouTube. So we can have a huge enhancement, and there's a great emphasis of growing in the future careers, but it can be a big danger too if we're not careful. It can be an invasion to the home life we used to think that we once had. It can be a substitute for real life learning, for real connection. It can be a substitute for parenting if you've ever handed your toddler an iPad. It can be a distraction. We're less focused on what's in the moment. We're less focused on what's connecting. A barrier of true connection. We have things called FaceTime on our phones, but we have very little face-to-face time in our houses sometimes. There's statistics about the amount of eye contact. So we have iPads or iPhones. We don't have a lot of eye contact. This is probably one of the longest eye contact experiences you're going to have today. Just think about that. Or not disruptive. Can you imagine? I mean, I could easily do this. Someone think it's normal and someone be offended. But that breaks that connection. So a pressure to conform. For teens, oftentimes it's a pressure to conform. If you take away technology, you just cut off access. And it's hard to keep up. And it's hard to see who's following you or who likes you. Think about those words in our brain. A facade of real life, it can be a safety issue. It's artificial, in which then it means it becomes an idol. It becomes a replacement of the God who gives us all things versus my phone through all things I can do. And we literally have words called artificial intelligence and virtual reality. Yet we have the world around us too. So I want you to think about for a moment, from your perspective, what has technology become? I didn't write that in your notes, and kids, you can ask your parents if they're doing their homework by writing things down. They have in all of your handouts, there's a little note section. For the rest of the handouts, I'm going to highlight those towards the end. But from your perspective, what has technology become? I stare at the floor, not because I'm socially awkward, but to give you space to think. If you want to say something, you can. But I'd start that question and go back to that with the kids. There's no right or wrong to that. There's probably a variety of answers. So I like this image here, puzzle pieces. It's kind of a daunting picture just in itself. I'm not quite doing a Rorschach where I have you tell me what you think it means. But let me ask you a question. If I gave you a puzzle box, and I told you there was 4 pieces missing, 4 or 5 pieces missing, would you put it together? Just do a quick statistic. Would you? Who wouldn't? A lot of people wouldn't. It's called completionist. We don't like that. Why not? It's mostly the same puzzle. Or parents, have you ever had it where your little kids dump all the puzzles in one child? You gotta figure out how to undo 4 or 5 puzzles at once? Yeah, almost every parent laughs. That's what it's like. Parenting is like that. 4 or 5 different puzzles trying to figure out where these pieces go and how do we fit this into a picture that we're proud of. Okay. And that's what also our life is like. We each have different pieces as kids, as parents, as teens, as a community, as Catholic Church. We all have different pieces, different opinions and different shapes and sizes. They don't all fit perfectly together, but we do have a piece to play and a piece to hold. And with technology, we hold different pieces of the puzzle. What works for you and your family and your world and your virtues or values. And that's why the discussion is so important. But we don't want to do it blindly. We want to do it honestly, eyes open, heart open. Let's focus on a few puzzle pieces. Oops. I don't know if I can say, hey Siri, but they cut that out, by the way. They shortened it because it's too long. And I'll just say Siri. You know that? Because they want to keep up with, I forget, Alexa. So they cut it out. They cut their word demand in half. It makes your brain work half as much as they did a favor for you. So we want to start with coordinating the context and intentions. What is the context in which you operate from? What's your intention, as I said earlier? An honest discussion. So this is the my generation versus your generation discussion. Not like you walked uphill twice both ways to school, that kind of thing. But in a sincere way, like what does this mean to me versus what does it mean to you? As I already said, digital immigrants are what we are as adults, and digital natives, and these are terms you can look up, are what your teens are, your children are. And there's different versions of that because the technology has continued. So, in the room, let's bring it into the room for a second. What were the different types of technology when you were in school, when you were in grade school or high school? Did you get a pass on this one because we already know the answer? But what were some of the? I had AOL Instant Messenger. I said I had Atari, Game Boy. What were some of those? Prepaid calling cards. You guys have those?
Like a portable CD player with headphones?
Yeah, one later, yeah. Anyone else? What were some of the technology? Talk to your kids about those. Share with those. Google pictures if you have to. Okay. For some reason, my boys are really into 80s music lately. I don't know why. I think they just like the beat or something, so they YouTube 80s Journey, Europe, or Final Countdown, and they're just like, wow, people wore that hair. I'm like, I didn't. Yes, I guess they did. So talk about that culture. Well, let me ask you, parents, when you were grounded to your room, who was with you? In case you ever got grounded, maybe you didn't. I'm a middle child, so I won't deny that I didn't. Who was with you in your room? No one, unless you had a sibling. When your kids are grounded to their room, who's with them? If they have an iPhone that doesn't have internet or doesn't have filters. Anyone. What could they do? Anything. That's a totally different thing. My kids asked if I want to be sent to my room for a nap. I said, yes, please. When you played outside, where did you play? What did you do? Ballpark? Found some neighbor kids. Do that now, you get arrested. We used to play kick the can, but like with a 4-block radius in the dark, so like dogs and bark is always fun, because you never know what dog would keep chasing you after your 5 houses down. We could get arrested too. When your kids play outside now, do your kids even play outside? Do they have to play outside to see their friends? In fact, have they ever went to their friend's house and rang a doorbell without texting first? They might not have. I'm not being facetious. Okay? It's different. Last one. When you had a rough day at school, or you got a bad grade, adults, parents, you got a bad grade. Let's say on a Thursday or Friday. How long did you have until you had to tell your parents? Or figure out how you can turn that F to an A? Oh, yes. When your kids have a bad day at school, how long do they have? You guys already checked before you pick them up. Or it got published on Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat. Everywhere. It's totally different. So just being aware of those are legitimate concerns or worries, and those are legitimate fears or sadnesses of what was and what isn't anymore. This is why we always say, go play outside. But there might not be anybody to play outside with because the park is empty. So if I were to do another word association quickly, silent retreat, what would you say?
Heaven.
Kids, what would you say? Silent retreat, you know what that is? You literally go to a place, you pay to go to a quiet place and just say nothing and do nothing for like a weekend. It's torture, child abuse. What if I said silencing your phone? Or simply not having it, what would you say? I bet you're going to get different answers if you're the parent of the kid. Both could be anxiety-inducing or hair-raising, or it could be solace and relief. So we're somewhere between needing it and not wanting to depend on technology, and we're somewhere between wanting it and not wanting to get away from it. And that's where the discussion, the context of the intentions. If I were to ask, what are your worst fears with technology? You as parents, them as kids and teens, what are your intentions? For kids, sometimes I ask this question to people in therapy, but a child, it would be almost like if you turn the technology off for a whole week, that'd be like a silence retreat, but unwanted. It'd be like turning them back to the 1800s where they have no connection to the outside world. There's no electricity, so to speak. It's as if you had a storm and you just don't have power for a while. Or parents, kids, if I asked your parents just to let your kids have the phone as long as they want and let them figure it out. Carte blanche, no hold bar, don't figure it out. It's like giving them a credit card. Not a debit card that has limits, but a credit card. And not knowing any way to track it and how many they even opened up. You probably wouldn't do that. But we gotta be somewhere in between there. As a parent myself, I know how my brain is always aware of where my kids are. I always know what they're needing, or at least I think I know what they're needing. I just ask my wife what they're needing. But if I don't hear them for a while, I usually kind of pay attention and it's louder. Or if I haven't seen them for a while, if they stop making noises, I really go check on them. Isn't that kind of like your phone too? If my phone stops making noises, or I don't know where it is, or I haven't seen it for a while, I have this feeling. And see, when kids have phones, their brains are always on. But at 13, 15, 18, your brain isn't fully developed at 25. That preoccupation isn't really good for them. It's not even good for adults. Those two scenarios are very similar, actually. It's called nomophobia. It's a legitimate panic attack phobia that people have when they don't have their phone. No phone phobia. And they have phone tremors. Do you ever have that? You thought your phone was in your pocket and it wasn't? I literally just thought my phone was in my pocket. I'm so used to it. Okay? This isn't a bad thing, it's worked its way into our brain. So I'd encourage you to have these tough conversations. There's this movie called We Bought a Zoo. Anyone? Not to spoil it, but they buy a zoo. It's Matt Damon. And there's different family dynamics, it's wonderful. But there's a scene where the dad and the son are struggling to communicate. And this is the quote where later in the movie he says, you just gotta have like 10 seconds of amazing courage and good things will happen. But the scene after they fight, that they have a conflict, the dad says, I don't know how to do this, man, I'm sorry. But let's try something. Let's both say what we want the other guy to say. Think about that. I'll have kids come in my room and I'll say, I'm gonna ask you, if I could sit your parents down, and I could pause pause them so they can't move, mute them so they can't say anything, and give them kind of like a brain amnesia so they won't remember. What would you ask them? What would you ask them for? What would you say to them? So if we can make a safe environment of courage and honesty, but also wanting goodness, because when you're not there, they're going to be moving towards that anyway, and when you're done parenting them, they're going to have to learn how to do this anyway. So if we can open the door to safe, honest communication, doesn't mean I'm going to agree with it, doesn't mean I'm going to just allow it, but I want to know what is those real ranges that's on their heart. So for kids to think about, what would I want my parents to think about or remember when I'm asking for technology, or when I have to use it in certain ways? What would I want them to think of me as? Am I not the child that they still love? Am I not capable of doing things, hard things? Have I shown maturity? Or parents, what would you want them to remember that you want for them, that you want good for them? So getting to the heart too of the conversation, so it's so much different than just a battle struggle of this thing, this evil thing that we're both on different battle lines. And part of this gets to connecting before you correct. Love and logic has that saying in other ways, but connect before you correct. A lot of times we zap them, don't do that, stop that. You're just zapping norepinephrine, and all you're doing is just telling them to pick a fight, they're just gonna fight back. But if you connect, if you can empathize before you try to shape it and shift it, it makes a lot more sense. So to teens, to invite, I would encourage you to write down your list, your top five technology requests. It'd be awesome if, or actually it'd be really helpful if I had. If you could just accept or trust this, I would love it if you said yes to this. Write those down. But then interview yourself. What would it do for you? Realistically, how would you use it? What won't it do for you? If it was a no, what else could you do instead? Teens, what's your role in keeping it a yes? So long as I also remember to not forget. Or parents, learn to interview them. We call those explorative questions. Explore and expand on it. And asking them, what does it offer? Why is it appealing? One of the resources I'll give you is a few websites that go through every app you can think of, and they show you a settings manual so you can kind of figure out how to change your settings. But they also teach you what it's used for, what it's supposed to be used for, and what kids actually use it for. And some have a danger rating, and some have a, yeah, this is no problem. You get to pick, but what does it do for you? What won't it do for you? Is it necessary? Is there anything that gets underdeveloped by using this? So when kids love Minecraft, great. I tell parents for every hour they do Minecraft, so long as they also do an hour of like Legos and an hour playing outside. Just think about it, there's only so many hours in the day, so if they want to play like Minecraft for 3 hours, it's a 9-hour day. That's a whole Saturday. But they're substituting other areas and they're using real interaction as well as something that has nothing to do with the technology. So being able to think about, are there any safety concerns if we say yes to this? Just as my dad handed me the keys, which I felt like was a rite of passage, I deserved it. So the goal of life often is to be predictable, positively predictable. I would say if I had to boil things down, the word congruent and incongruent. When your life is working towards congruence, things are good, positively predictable. The Bible could be broken down to those words for the most part. The Bible said, God in Genesis made the world, Adam and Eve, and said it is good. Adam and Eve fell into sin. The Israelites said, certainly you brought me here to die. It is incongruent again. Jesus comes, it is congruent. Jesus leaves, it's incongruent. Paul tells us Jesus coming again is congruent eventually. Okay? So when we're positively predictable in life, things are going well. It's the negatively predictable. I see that coming. My kids would get a Christmas present, my twin boys would get every time they got a Christmas present, I slightly cried because I just see ahead of time the 5 different ways they're going to fight over this thing. Right? It's negatively predictable. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Okay? Or negative unpredictable is the hard one. That's where trauma and chaos comes. I didn't see that coming. I had no idea you were capable of doing that. Or I didn't mean to do that. I thought I was just clicking. I thought I just sent something and they went forward with everybody else. So that negatively unpredictable. We got to move it towards positive, what is healthy and good, and how do we make this predictable? Not controlled necessarily, but predictable. Does that make sense? Positive, predictable. Because almost all your arguments are gonna be in the negative predictable or negative unpredictable. What do I want this to be a story of? And then what am I concerned it could become a story of? So I'm gonna, communicating our concerns. I'm gonna play a video. There's one word that I don't fully approve of, and I apologize. It's not horrible, but.
We had it, I think we stopped it.
Probably. What if I push that button?
I have 422 friends, yet I'm lonely. I speak to all of them every day, yet none of them really know me. The problem I have sits in the spaces between looking into their eyes or at a name on a screen. I took a step back and opened my eyes. I looked around and realised that this media we call social is anything but when we open our computers and it's our doors we shut. All this technology we have, it's just an illusion. Community, companionship, a sense of inclusion. Yet when you step away from this device of delusion, you awaken to see a world of confusion. A world where we're slaves to the technology we mastered, where information gets sold by some rich, greedy bastard. A world of self-interest, self-image, self-promotion, where we all share our best bits but leave out the emotion. We're at our most happy with an experience we share. But is it the same if no one is there? Be there for your friends, and they'll be there too, but no one will be if a group message will do. We edit and exaggerate, crave adulation. We pretend not to notice the social isolation. We put our words into order until our lives are glistening. We don't even know if anyone is listening. Being alone isn't the problem. Let me just emphasise, if you read a book, paint a picture, or do some exercise, you're being productive and present, not reserved and recluse. You're being awake and attentive and putting your time to good use. So when you're in public and you start to feel alone, put your hands behind your head, step away from the phone. You don't need to stare at your menu or at your contact list. Just talk to one another. Learn to coexist. I can't stand to hear the silence of a busy commuter train where no one wants to talk through the fear of looking insane. We're becoming unsocial. It no longer satisfies to engage with one another and look into someone's eyes. We're surrounded by children who, since they were born, have watched us living like robots and think it's the norm. It's not very likely you'll make world's greatest dad if you can't entertain a child without using an iPad. When I was a child, I'd never be home. Be out with my friends on our bikes we would roam. I'd wear holes in my trainers and graze up my knees. We'd build our own clubhouse high up in the trees. Now the park's so quiet it gives me a chill. See no children outside and the swings hanging still. There's no skipping, no hopscotch, no church and no steeple. We're a generation of idiots, smartphones and dumb people. So look up from your phone, shut down display. Take in your surroundings, make the most of today. Just one real connection is all it can take to show you the difference that being there can make. Be there in the moment that she gives you the look that you remember forever as when love overtook. The time she first holds your hand or first kiss your lips. The time you first disagree but still love her to bits. The time you don't have to tell hundreds of what you've just done because you want to share this moment with just this one. The time you sell your computer so you can buy a ring for the girl of your dreams who is now the real thing. The time you want to start a family and the moment when you first hold your little girl and get to fall in love again. The time she keeps you up at night and all you want is rest. And the time you wipe away the tears as your baby flees the nest. The time your baby girl returns with a boy for you to hold. And the time he calls you granddad and makes you feel real old. The time you take in all you've made just by giving life attention, and how you're glad you didn't waste it by looking down at some invention. The time you hold your wife's hand, sit down beside her bed, you tell her that you love her, lay a kiss upon her head. She then whispers to you quietly, as her heart gives a final beat, that she's lucky she got stopped by that lost boy in the street. But none of these times ever happened. You've never had any of this. When you're too busy looking down, you don't see the chances you miss. So look up from your phone, shut down those displays. We have a finite existence, a set number of days. Don't waste your life getting caught in the net, as when the end comes, nothing's worse than regret. I'm 22, we're being part of this machine, this digital world. We are heard but not seen, where we type as we talk and we read as we chat, where we spend hours together without making eye contact. So don't give in to a life where you follow the hype. Give people your love, don't give them your like. Disconnect from the need to be heard and defined. Go out into the world, leave distractions behind. Look up from your phone, shut down that display. Stop watching this video, live life the real way.
There. See, there's this, in our brains, whatever age we are, this scarcity. In our brains, our scarcity kicks in and our fire alarm goes off, and we're always afraid there won't be enough. And a version of that is missing out. And children have a different perspective, and teens have a different perspective of what they're missing out. If I don't check my phone, I miss out the score, or I miss out that invite. But parents have a different kind of missing out of life, or things that used to matter, or things that we don't get to always hold on to. Parents, you probably know that living is grieving. There's a certain amount of number, you all have a number with your kids, you know the number probably of how long you have until they're 18. We get that one. Yet we use a lot of time doing different things, and we have to. But we have to really ask ourselves, what are we missing out on in missed opportunities? And put it in perspective, this isn't condemning anything, but just being able to recognize what's the missed opportunities. And from a kid's perspective versus a parent's, it's going to be different, but there's something good in there. And I think it's important to talk about what's the perceived threat, what's the fear that you'll miss out on, what's the urgency, what's the importance you're putting to something. And those two lines have to find a way to harmonize, or else we'll just have battle lines and power struggles. As a therapist, my concerns is everything is so fast-paced. Everything is so overscheduled, excessive, instant access. Our brains aren't meant to put up, we're not made for that, to be quite honest. It's overload. In fact, I read a research, I'll be doing one for 20s and 30s next week or so here. I forgot the exact research, but I think it's 10,000 gigabytes or something a week of information we have that we go through, that we process. That's enough to crash a computer. I don't even know how I remember half the stuff I forgot. But if I just keep, you look at Netflix, most people have some kind of Netflix or something. Do you remember those movie trailers? How cool they were when the final movie trailer would come out and be like 30 seconds or a minute and a half of like, oh, that movie looks so good, right? And you'd be excited about it, you'd feel the excitement, you can't wait, you anticipate. When you look at a Netflix screen with all the different movies, your brain literally, you're fast forwarding through it in your mind so quick, you've already tried on the movie, I've seen it, haven't seen it, don't want it, don't care. You're going through it so fast. And you're not connecting to the emotions or the interests, so just being aware of the concerns, because what happens in our brain, this is all research, is we lose the ability to contemplate. Think of that as Christians and Catholics. We lose the ability to contemplate. The part of our brain gets smaller and smaller, we don't contemplate. So an antidote to that is use words, be able to express. But think of how powerful it is to contemplate on the Word of God. To be still and know that He's there, to take in the daily bread. But if we can't contemplate, we just skip right past. In fact, the average brain attention span, our attention span as humans, race, it went down. I think it's from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, 15 to 12. I can't remember. I might be thinking rodeo, 8 seconds. 15 to 12. All I know is it's below a goldfish. In the last 15 years, we're now below a goldfish, our ability to attention span. That's human evolution. That's our brain because of technology. It's okay. It's just we have to realize what it does when we don't sit long enough to hear someone, to speak to someone, to connect to someone. We lose the ability to connect, as it says, compassion. That's the other one. We lose compassion and empathy. Our brains are pretty much always on survival mode. So we're very self-referencing. And we're kind of kings and queens of our own world, because we can pretty much order anything. I can get pizza right now if you want it. I can get Amazon Prime to your house for free. I got delivered. Like, we can basically skip a lot of human life because it's so accessible. But we lose that ability to have compassion and empathy and put the other. And then we lose, similar, the ability to regulate. Impulse control. Think before we act. And it's because we have to make such quick decisions all the time. And the eye contact one, I usually do a different video of that one tonight. But if you go to the grocery store, I don't know how many of those little debit card machines they make, but none of them are the same. Every time I try to push the button, every beep beeps at me, and then I think I got the other one right, and they're like, oh, you gotta do this. So where do you look at when you go to the grocery store and you hand in your cash? Oh no, you don't do cash anymore. Where do you look when you're at the grocery store, the cashier stand? Beep. Okay, ready? We lose that rapport. We lose the social skills. Such a subtle thing. So the missed opportunities of our brain, if we aren't aware of it and kind of hang in that, we're going to lose atrophy, just like our body if we never exercise it. In fact, when your brain watches movies or video games, it's doing some things, but there's a big part of the brain that's not doing anything. So it'd be like me saying I worked out by turning on the treadmill, sitting on the couch, grabbing popcorn, watching a ball game for an hour. When the treadmill beeps after an hour, I just ran 6.2 miles. And my wife and I watch a movie, 2 hours, we didn't talk. We had a shared experience, but if we don't come back and talk about what you think, how can you relate? What's it like for you? Oh, that reminds me of. Oh, that really inspires me to. If we don't have that conversation, we just survived 2 hours. We breathe the same air. We didn't connect. This makes sense? Subtle, but like carbon dioxide, it's subtle, but it's that if we're not careful. So the accessibility, when you want to think about how do we address this, accessible, anything that's too accessible in our life, or too abundant in our life, anything that is, and the constancy of it, it creates a blatant or subtle addictiveness, and that's a whole other brain piece. Social media can be considered the economy of attention. So like financial economy, the economy of attention. What draws attention? What produces money based on the amount of likes or the amount of so it's attention. So then we're trained how to, if we want that and we like that economy, we're going to figure out how to get attention. Silly things, inappropriate things, sentimental things. There can be a whole bunch of ways to get attention, but it's the attention economy. And again, it gets drawn away towards hopefully our bigger God. It's a competition for preferences of usually our brain likes comfort and convenience. Our God likes us to grow in character. We're going to take the easy button usually if we can. And a lot of issues or concerns that I see with parents and clients, whether we talk about technology directly, there's a loss of home life, there's a school function, a work function issue, we're mental health, we're exposed to things that we're not ready for as teens in particular. Pressure to conform, pornography, social media. There's a lot of legal issues that can happen if we're not careful. So I'm going to get to filters in a moment. But just think unintendedly, these are real issues, legal issues. Someone texts something that gets sent to something that gets sent, and all of a sudden it's a sexting, and all of a sudden if you have that in your phone, and you're a parent, you're holding on to child pornography. Or child has a sleepover, 4 kids. That child falls asleep, those other kids figure out their child's Facebook account on your home, your computer, your device. They bully, bad things happen. Who gets arrested? Whose phone was it? Whose computer was it? Yours. Whose username was it? Your child's. So unintendedly, now kids aren't saying, I can't wait to get you in jail. Like, they're not doing that when they ask for their phone, for the cool Christmas gift. So just being aware of that unintended consequences, which is a key, I think, opportunity for us. And then we just lose a sense of integrity of our morals at times, or at least we become desensitized to. I read ESPN, a couple news channels, local and national, and in about 5 minutes I get up and go. I read a lot of information in 5 minutes while I'm still waking up, and then I go. There's a lot of real things that happen in those stories that I can't fully process. And I'm a therapist. So we've become desensitized because of the information. We don't want that. So our kids, how do we balance this purpose and need versus want and prefer? How do we balance what's healthy versus unhealthy or just unnecessary? Forever, there's gonna be a freedom versus responsibility, power struggle with parents. That's the good news. That's what we have with God. Forever, there's gonna be accessibility and acceptance, a sense of accountability, but also that sameness. I wanna feel the same as others versus we don't wanna have insanity enter into our life because of it. So we wanna balance those and communicate those concerns so we can at least put it in front of us. Did y'all play euchre for sheep's head? Yep. Y'all play poker? Or at least seen it? What's the difference? One, you're playing with a team. Every other person's on your team. One, you're playing against someone, or everybody. But really, the game is the same. It's cards. You have cards and you have information. And when I share my information, and you could be awesome if you could cheat, because then you just put all your information on the table, your hand or your team. You make the best hand you can. You might not always win, but at least you optimize your play. But if you did that in poker, what would happen? So as a family, if we're starting to play poker when we communicate, I don't want to share everything because if I do, you might. So we want to really create that, sharing concerns from a compassionate place. So the spirit of collaborating, co-laboring with God, co-laboring with each other. I want you to pray on these things. So listen to your kids' concerns. Listen to their suggestions. Kids, write up business plans. Mom, Dad, I would love it if I could have the car this week. You're 16, you're probably eligible, you two probably aren't eligible. But just as soon as, I'm a yes, as soon as you're old enough and show responsibility and prepay your insurance and maybe down pay for the car in case I gotta buy a new one, I'm a yes for that. So help your kids make reasonable proposals, but then show the effort to be eligible for that. Does that make sense? And parents, say what you're wanting to be a yes to. I tell my kids all the time, I'm a yes for so long as. When they were like 3 and 5, I'd bring them to the toy store by myself on purpose. As long as they accept that they start to cry, we leave, and they're willing to find one thing that they would like to get for someone in our life, and one thing they're appreciative of toy makers making something cool for some other kid to play. So I wanted to teach them empathy and gratitude or thinking of others. As long as they do those, I'll take them to the toy store all the time, as long as we're not crying and draining energy. I'm using their incentives in a direction that shapes them. So collaborating, you can do that on small little things or big things. But really, a lot of times it's going to be based on parameters based on your principles. So my daughter, you'll probably see this if you put it on YouTube, but she doesn't like this line. I've asked her since she's been probably 5th grade, honey, when will you get a phone? Dad, you always tell me you'll get a phone when you need it for the reasons you need it. I've been teaching her that since 5th grade. Now those reasons she needs it might change, and this year it did change. So we got a simple phone that has access for when she's at different events. But that principle isn't that complicated, and as long as I'm at peace with what I'm saying, then she can learn to see that that is a good reason. If she wants to come up with other reasons and they're legitimate, I'll probably listen to her. But that co-laboring, that willingness to put parameters, there's an organization called Wait Till 8th grade. So think about getting to a yes. What would you be a yes for? Kids, I don't know if you know Staples, they had this easy button commercial. Think of your mom and dad as an easy button. There's an easy button right in the middle of their head somewhere. See if you can find the easy button. What would be the easiest way for them to say yes? And interview them if you have to. But then show the eligibility for that, show the credibility. Mom and dad, what's the best way to say yes? So let me ask you parents, see if you're all, I think, pretty normative. Would you be comfortable so long as there's no safety issues? Sex, drugs, violence. No trust issues between us. No conflicts because of it. Doesn't cause a distraction or disconnect from our normal family life. It doesn't impede on your development, whether it's school or your emotions, your mentality, your relational, spiritual. And it doesn't become a substitute for other things that are also important to you. As long as it's the yes to those, would you be okay with it? You might add a few more. You'd have to define those a little bit. But think of that so long as. Because God does the same thing to us. I give you all these things so long as. But they're rooted in principle, they're rooted in goodness, and they're not to harm us, they're to grow us. So it's really parenting with technology is the same we've done. We just have to be comfortable and familiar with recognizing what it can turn into and shaping it towards good, using it for good. So proposals based on principles for kids and technology contracts for parents. Now, I always get a follow-up question. By the way, I'll stay after if anyone has questions. They'll say, well, these contracts are great, but how do I enforce it? Well, that's something you gotta think about. But the contracts are really collaborative. What is a reasonable and fair thing? So if I wanted to sign up for $1 million right now, buy a house or something, I'd have to have what? Credit rating, I'd have to have referrals, I'd have to have a job, I'd have to have certain things that the bank would say, and if I don't pay it back, what happens? And then what would my consequence be? Am I willing to say yes to that and sign up for that? So a contract is more about really coming to the table with what am I seeing value committing to? And there's other, there is a contract in here I'll have you look at later, but just circle, you can find these online a lot. I brought a Christian one to the table. There's other ones. Just print off 4 or 5 of them, and just circle things that you think, yeah, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. Like, oh, that one doesn't fit for us. Okay, that's fine. Where do you use technology? When do you use it? Just simple words. But being able to just really think about what is our policy with technology. It's like an owner's manual. You need help, my dad will read it for you, and he'll type it all up for you. The safety parameters. So learning to discern and pray on what are the parameters, what are we concerned about, and having that discussion. But then deciding on it with a practice so we can review. Give it a probationary period. Give it 30 days. See how it goes. And don't just have a don't spirit of it, but have a what are we trying to grow into? How can we use this as a blessing to others or ourselves? How can we use this as a connection point to others or ourselves? So think of a couple of principles you want to say yes to. And how do we incorporate that? How do we use it as altruism and growth or connection, as I already said? So it's not just what you're saying no to. For parents, filters are important. There's 2 resources on there as starting points. The Covenant Eyes has a Christian component. Safe Eyes is a team-based one. But I want you to just think for a second, there's a spectrum of filters. So filters, just like you wouldn't have your kids drive without a seatbelt, but how do you enforce their wearing it? State Farm places have your car shuts down if it goes over 72. Now, like you can control their car's speed and stuff, or at least see a port. Same thing with technology. We can do the no adjustments, free reign, go for it. That's on one side. I don't know if you want to do that, but you can try it. Or we could do the total control. And they used to have a Disney Circle, it's called. And when any phone would come in, you could, anybody's phone, other kids too, you don't know their codes, but you turn off, it lets you have the app that turns off the VPN, like a Snapchat or Twitter, or you just make a list of things you don't want in your house and boop, 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 turn it off. Oh, what happened to my phone? I don't know, that's weird. They don't know what happened. Or there's a holiday cage, Faraday cage. Does anyone know what that is, by the way? I learned that from a client. It's electromagnetic, it looks like a bird cage, and it's a science thing, it has nothing to do with technology, but it literally shuts off all electromagnetic cellular, so the phone just doesn't work inside it. So you literally put your phone in the cage and they can't use it. Now I wouldn't recommend doing that one extreme probably, and I wouldn't recommend the other. But somewhere in between is probably going to be a good fit for you. And the other ones are going to be transparency focused, where you can use this, but I'm going to see what you do. So one's like Accountable to You is a website. It's complete transparency. Careful, anything they type, you'll see it. Careful, anyone they text, you'll see it. So they got to know that using it. It's like if I rented a car and it was bugged to the mic, I got to know that legally. Parents want to be reasonable with your kids. So if they want to sign up for it, that's fine. At least you can see what they naturally would do. And if they're going to do something and they know you know it, we got different relational parenting dynamics going on anyway. So there is some benefit to that, where it's a complete transparency, but there's almost no restrictions. And then there's a tracking. You can track for certain apps. You can put geofences, it's called, tracking and filtering. Filtering is I can see you and slightly limit you. I see what you're doing. If there's a red flag or there's an accidental. The problem with that one sometimes, like ESPN, it would shut it down because there's too many ads that pop up, and I wouldn't be able to see it because it looks like it's something inappropriate. And it might not be, or it could be. The click of the click of the click is usually what gets people in trouble. So there's tracking apps. That's what the Covenant Eyes one and the Accountable to You. There's somewhere in between. Those are the ones they use a lot. There's some that are more detailed in anti-incognito or private browser. Your phones, your apps have private browsers, and for the most part, it says it doesn't track cookies. It kind of tracks it. Legally, it tracks it if something happened, but you can't really tell where they went and what they're doing on it. So you're gonna wanna learn to turn that off, or have a way of seeing if they turned it off, so then you know what kind of trust level we have. Remember, I won't hand someone if I don't trust that they're also trying to do well with it. If this is important enough to you as it is to me, we'll work together. If you show me it isn't, then I've gotta slide back towards waiting until you can show me you're building that character. Or else there's the testing it out type phones. That's what we do, the GAB phone, GAB. It's just a simple phone, kind of a dumb phone. It can have texting apps, but we see everything. It can have, and there's benefits to it for my kids to feel socially connected enough, but not too exposed to things. So there's different practice that are social media or smartphones and things. So when you look at these two websites, Parents Covenant Eyes is a filter, the Parenting Safe Teens, there's some, check out the ones they recommend. But I just want you to think of that spectrum. Depends on how old your kids are, the practice levels. For financial, how did you handle money? Did you give them a budget? Did you give them allowances? Did you just give them your checkbook? Did you never give them money until they're 18 and now they figure it out? So how did you handle that? Because that's kind of how we want to handle technology. So that'll probably be more based on your principles. Okay. Last one, connecting or containing chaos. So name it and contain it. As I already said, like a new toy for my kids, I had a couple of years ago. So how do we stave off certain things we don't want to have happen, but how do we name what's going on or what's working? So if we try this contract, if we try to do some kind of plan, what's going well, what's not? But that comes down to essentially having a family check-in meeting. Let's go over the budget, so to speak. What's going well, what's not? I ask my kids that when I drive, I give them permission, so they've been able to do this for a long time, since they're like 2. Hey guys, thumbs up day or not day? How was dad today, guys? They get to give me a report card. Now, if they say thumbs down because I didn't take them to Disneyland, I'm probably not going to take them very serious. Or I'm usually like a 3rd round draft pick, they always say. Daddy'd be like a 3rd or 4th round draft pick. My wife's always like the #1 pick, like, well, but that's fine. She bakes for them and she does a lot better than I do. But so giving feedback on, hey, what's going well, what's not so well? What are we learning? What might we have to, green light, yellow light, red light is another way to do that. Kids pretty at a young age know green light means go, as long as we're reasonable, we're good. Yellow light, kids, do your parents stop at a yellow light or do they go faster? Don't have to answer that. We do both sometimes, right? It just depends. So yellow light, your situations, or red light, hey, we crossed the line, we gotta really think about this. So having that feedback and that auto-correcting. As parents, you might be relieved, just like the Apollo missions at first to get to the moon, those missions were off, like 95% of the time they were off track. But they just kept recalibrating, recorrecting. Just like your GPS. I was like making my GPS map sometimes where I go a different route. It's you idiot. He's kind of talking to me until I finally listen. But the calibrating, as parents, if you know baseball at all, a 300 baseball batting average is a really good batting average. Gets you in the All-Star game. 400, Hall of Fame. Parents, you only have to be right 40% of the time. You can mess up 60 to 70% of the time. I'm serious. That's what research said. And have very established, loving, founded kids. So long as they know you love them, you're willing to be adaptable, you're continuing to invest in goodness, and you keep showing willingness to be positively predictable. You don't have to get it right every time. Neither do they, though. Remember that. So only risk what you want to have happen, but definitely work with we're going to hit the guardrails a little bit. Probably why my dad gave me a 95 Chevy Lumina, not his new one, okay? Because I was going to bump it, sure enough, the tire one day was sideways, and you didn't know what happened. So we're not going to always drive this straight, but how do we keep coming back to it? How do we pray on it? How do we build privileges based on responsibilities? One of the signs of maturity for teens is when they can self-appoint a curriculum and consequences. I appreciate the privilege of this, and I want to honor your concerns about me also doing good grades or service, community service or growing in the. So I'm going to work on these things as you're also saying yes to this. And if these go down in different ways, I accept and would expect you to not let me have access because of this. Until I get this up, and it's on me to show you my grades, not you to find them. Right? See, that's initiative, proactive. These are just character building. Use this as a tool, an arena to build character and to grow. If you proactive, or kids, kids, parents, you can kind of do like a credit rating. If you ever credit or anything, you can kind of give them a credit rating. Hey, you're like green, you're doing good, you're at 100. Oh boy, you went down to 300. You just took out way too many, there are too many expenses here. And being able to keep that in mind of how to keep that as auto-correcting, but it comes to prayer. It comes to really keep reconnecting and realigning ourselves. Realigning and reaffirming what our original goal was, our intentions. So I started with that. Last one is co-stewarding. So stewardship is a scripture, Christian-based. It's an upper story. What's the bigger picture? Executive functioning skills is your brain developing, and as babies, you start with your brain grows from the inside out. So babies cry. That's all they know how to do. Then about 2 to 3, they start using words. And then about 5 to 6, they start coming up with their own ideas. And then they grow. Teenagers, you don't grow fully until 23 to 26. Your brain starts to finally develop at the end. It's like a hotel where you see it being built. All these big pillars are there and cranes swinging things, but you don't see anything until there's a hotel. The brain doesn't fully develop. What's the last part of the brain that develops? Frontal cortex, executive function. That's the parenting part of the brain. Like time management. Did you ever ask your kids to be on time? Or organization. Or if you looked up executive functioning skills, you see about 10 of them, and they're all things that's why kids, you need your parents for a while, but eventually their job is to help you fire them too. They'll always love you and they'll always be for you, but they don't always want you to have to borrow their brain. But the 3 key important ones, and I see this in therapy with clients and adults, is the ability to be flexible in thinking. You can short circuit yourself as parents, or kids or parents have temper tantrums too, they just do it different. But temper tantrum is when you're too rigid in thinking. So the more we can be flexible in thinking, the more we can be bigger picture thinking. So metacognition, it's called. Jesus spoke in parables, metaphors. This also means this. We're here, but this is the bigger picture. And you can keep that in mind. You're able to do the last one, which is emotional regulation. It's staying balanced, not losing your cool. Being able to breathe, as Scripture tells us. Be still. So we want to have a big picture of why we're doing this, so it's not just a bunch of zapping and control, or else you're going to create all temper tantrums everybody around. So bigger picture thinking, flexibility, and yeah, that's not how I would do it, and then a willingness to work together towards it. So images such as a mirror. Think of a mirror. When you look in a mirror, parents, try this one. Stand in the mirror with your kid or kids or a big family. You got to step back in the living room and hold a phone in front of it. Don't take a picture. Just hold the phone. Just take a. What do you see? What do you want to see? What's reflected? Remember those words you'd associate? So reflecting or seeing what you want to see. What do your kids see when you're holding a phone? Do they see you following your own rules? Do they see a Christ-like walk? Do they see excuse making? My child asked me, why do I drive faster than the speed limit? Really good question. So I want to get there. Oh, that's entitlement. Well, I want to do it for you because then we can have more fun. Oh, that's not teaching them. It's a good question. Dad, why do you check your phone occasionally? Well, I just have to. I try to predict it, but yeah, I've got to ask that. So look in a mirror and really just reflect on it. But kids, your parents are also like lighthouses. And what does a lighthouse do? It's solid and stays as close to the water, and it shines its light. So who benefits from the lighthouse? Those in the water. Guess what, kids? They're the lighthouse, you're the water. You're the boats in the water. Now, do parents, as they get older, are they like lighthouses? Do they shine their spotlight and jump in the boat with you? And no, they say, hey, here's wisdom. Here's what I want for you. Here's what I hope for you. Here's where I stand. This is what I still believe in. But you've got to decide how you navigate it. I can't do it for you every time. Can't do it for you anymore. I don't do that when they're too young, because they'll crash. But being able to, you're a lighthouse. And at the end of the 18 years, you're basically like an anchor, rooted in principle. You're giving them that rope, that boat. And you're saying, throughout these past 18 years, when you were showing responsibility and accountability, I could give you a lot more leeway, and I want to watch you do awesome things. But when you started struggling, I had to rein it in a little bit so you could learn before you went out again. But now that you're 18, this is your rope. You decide what you do. This is your phone, your rope, your life, your college, your career. It's yours. I hope you remember. I hope you care. I hope you still know how to return. But this is yours. So we want to picture that day as you're also looking in that mirror. Does that make sense? That's a bigger picture while you're living in the moment. It'll help you keep the two in mind, just as we read the Bible, what happened versus, oh, that's what's still going to happen. There will be a day, and we want to have that bigger picture in mind. And then the last, with kids, remember, reintroduce yourself. You guys are, your brains are like phones, where it updates. You ever notice that? Teenagers update themselves every like 6 weeks. They're different versions of themselves, right? You might feel that way too, maybe. But reintroduce yourself. Hey, last month I didn't handle that well, but this month I really want. Or reignite, realign yourself. Show them who you are. Be willing to reveal. And parents, keep returning them to God, because at the end of the day, this is their journey. God's journey is temporary, and this is their journey. Up for questions. Up for, I tried to aim it right at you. About an hour and 5 minutes. That was the plan. Go to resources before you try to politely leave. I gave other ideas, and you can kind of self-explanatory, but these are the ones I found to be helpful. I do these therapeutic assignments sometimes, just like it sounds like, writing a mission statement. What do we stand for? What do we believe? What is the purpose? You can practice it on a vacation. Hey guys, who wants to go on vacation? Woohoo, everybody. Why? Why are we going? What do we want to accomplish? What don't we want this to become? What are you willing to do if it starts to become like that? What will you do so we can make it more what we want and less of what we don't? Right? All right, who wants to go? Okay, let's go. Same thing. Before we bring technology, what do we want this to be? What don't we want it to be? So a mission statement. Not a bunch of principles that you don't actually follow or believe, but really, truly, who's going to do what and how are we going to do it? Or a family budget. Where do we tithe? Where do we set aside time? What do we prepay? The time we would have used spent, let's say, watching family movie night, we do that maybe once every 3 months we would pick, we don't do it yet, but we would pick and we donate that time to volunteer. In addition to what we believe. Okay, so think about the way you tithe or family budget or just unplug time. As parents, set the tone. Wednesday night, 30 minutes. We read a magazine or a book or the Bible. We do personal development time. That's what we believe in. Everything's unplugged for 30 minutes. Whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't have technology. Okay? You're setting the tone. Just like eating healthy or working out together. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. We're just implying it to here. And then obviously these are incredibly common sense. But that is, if you want to pay like $20,000 to have your brain addicted child in a technology camp therapy, they're just going to take them out to the wilderness and they're going to get them to talk to each other in a circle and actually look at each other when they talk, and they're going to get them to do volunteer service, and they're going to get them to take hikes and to get them back into nature and actually touch things that are real and alive. That's all they're going to do for the most part, just detoxing their brain. So do these more often and know why you're doing it. It's so simple. It's back to the basics. You see the contract? That's just an example. There's others. The Digital Invasion is one of the books. This is like written 7 years, might be longer, I think 7 years ago. It's Dr. Archibald Hart's daughter, Sylvia Freidhart. That was one of the original, and she takes more of an adult approach, but she takes like the mental, some of your questions earlier, the psychological concerns, the emotional, the relational, the spiritual, and then how it shows up in the office, and she just takes kind of different areas of your life and helps you understand some of the research behind it. 7 years, so it's a little outdated. Unfortunately, this stuff gets updated so fast. These things don't. That's why I do this presentation the way I am, because this is not going to change. The screen balanced family, though, is the one I would have. If you want to take this conversation into actual plan, it's about a 6 or 8 week module. It's 15, 20-minute video, 5-minute, maybe 10-minute video, and like 2 handouts per week. And the whole goal, kids, is to actually be a part of the plan, to communicate, and he talks just like I am to both people, and help you create a plan that works for your family. So the Screenwise family, I'd highly recommend. Again, it's about 7 years old. Joshua Stroud, he's research-based, a lot of great resources, but that's probably the best one I've found that really creates a family-based. And then you see the Protect Young Eyes, Plugged In, Common Sense Media. those are good ones to reference point in case you haven't heard of what your kids just said all their other friends are doing. It's a good one to reference. It also has settings and tools and things to kind of give parent guides to, just so you're informed. I can give you a lot of these, but these are very user-friendly. The internet filters, as I mentioned, these are both Christian-based, and then parenting resources, Love and Logic, Boundaries. These are foundational parenting things, but just in the context of technology. They won't talk about technology. They have some updated resources maybe, but just getting back to some of the basics, because a lot of that is really you're being comfortable and confident what you're doing is of goodness, even when they quote-unquote don't like you very much because of it, but love them anyway. But also be willing to not just callous their heart because you're too firm, but don't just give in because you're too cute. Is that fair? And then my website is not promoting therapy. It's really all about resources. It's a library and a train station. So if you know what you're looking for, you'll find it in 3 clicks or less, and it's a huge library of resources. That's the best way to contact me if you have any follow-ups to this type of material or want anything that's not therapy becomes a therapy discussion. I'll just have to have you call the front office or whatnot. All right, I'm here for questions as needed. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for seeing at least the opportunity to do what you probably already know. It's just applying it in a different realm, which